All right, so we're going to move on to lesson 8. Lesson 7 covered the beginning, the foundation of the Edo period, the first half of the Edo period. Lesson 8 is going to cover the second half of the Edo period. And these two periods, it's the same period, but there's some interesting turning points that take place between the two halves of the Edo period. So by the year 1651, which was the year that Tokugawa Iemitsu, the third shogun, dies, the Tokugawa regime's position is completely solid. Okay, there's the country's at peace. Most people don't even remember the Warring States period, and this new popular culture develops. Most people are happy. The economy's good. Things are great for the reasons that we discussed in lesson 7. But after 1651, even though the Tokugawa shogunate's position does not weaken, it's still very strong. They're in complete control. The rule of the shoguns turns extremely conservative, okay, because they realize that they've made these great changes, and they say that we're not going to change anything about our government because, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it wasn't broke, but at the same time, I'm sure it could have been improved. The shoguns just refused to improve anything because there wasn't really a need to at this point. Things were fine, okay? So they didn't want to change their policies, their style of government. For example, they could have maybe allowed the outside daimyo to come into government after, a few generations passed. They didn't because, well, that's how it's always been. So that's kind of the attitude of the Tokugawa shoguns from 1651 all the way until the end of the shogunate in 1868. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, and they don't want to make any changes. And at this point, it's not broke, but it may start to get broken later on. And if you don't fix it, the cracks are going to get bigger and bigger. But for now, this conservative attitude really lasts until the end of the Edo period. So 1703 marks the 100th anniversary of the Tokugawa government, okay, and the country was still at peace 100 years later, thanks to those reforms that were enacted by the first few, namely the first three shoguns, Ieyasu, Hidetada, and Iemitsu. Okay, and people enjoyed the popular culture of the Edo period. What we discussed, the entertainment quarters, Neo-Confucian philosophy was very famous, so things were good in the Edo period. And because things were good, during the 1700s, the Japanese population rose from 18 million at the beginning of the 18th century. In the beginning in 1700, it was only 18 million. By 1799, by 1800, the population of Japanese rose to a whopping 30 million. Okay, in just a century. Think about that. And it's not like the samurai class who is at the top of the pyramid. Remember that triangle I showed you? They're the top social class. The samurai class only accounted for 7% of the population. Okay? It's mostly farmers, merchants, and artisans who are part of this population increase. So, what do you think causes the population increase of the 1700s and 1800s? Well, there's three reasons. Okay, for one, there's no fighting. Okay, the country is completely at peace. During the Warring States period, life expectancy was low because there's famine, there's disease, there's fighting. You don't know when the one warrior clan, one daimyo is going to attack its neighbor. A lot of people were killed in the crossfire. Now the country's at peace, no fighting, so generally longer life expectancy. Economic growth. Okay, Japan's domestic economy is growing at an alarmingly positive rate, and life is just better for people in general. Okay, and finally, a flourishing urban culture, entertainment growth. Okay, culture is just booming. People are happy, and when people are happy, they reproduce and they live longer, and that's why the population really grew during the Edo period. There were some small hiccups along the way, and I'm sure some of you have heard of the 47 Ronin story. Most recently, this was a movie with Keanu Reeves, although that particular film, which I have not seen but I've heard a lot about, is not historically accurate. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the real story of the 47 Ronin, which is an example of samurai tales during the Edo period. Okay, that took place in actually in the year 1701. Okay, so as part of the alternate attendance system, the Lord of Hiroshima province, okay, his name was Lord Asano. Asano comes to Edo as part of his, deal. That's his routine. That's a duty as a daimyo. You have to participate in alternate attendance. So he came to Edo to serve the Tokugawa shogun. Okay. And so the shogun at the time was Shogun Tsunayoshi. I believe he was either the fifth or the sixth Tokugawa shogun. Anyway, so Asano, any daimyo clan who comes, any daimyo leader who comes to the country, to Edo, has to do something, as part while they're in serving the shogun. And so his part of the deal, his goal, his duty was he was put in charge of organizing banquets and entertainment for the shogun. So he was like one of the master of ceremonies. Whenever there was a party in Edo Castle, Asano was the one who had to organize everything. That was his job. And Asano was still young, so he wasn't the one who was going to be fully in charge. He needed people to help him out who had more experience than he did. So the shogun appoints a Lord Kira. Okay, Kira is much older. He was one of the shogun's retainers, and he would be the official master of ceremonies. He would, he was the one in charge. Asano was kind of helping him out, doing all the grunt work. Since he was young and Kira was older and more experienced in the position, so Asano was like shadowing under Kira. Okay, Kira was an egoist. He had a huge ego, and he hated Asano from the beginning. Okay, and we don't know why. Probably because Asano was younger. Kira just didn't like him for whatever reason. So he would ignore Asano, and even though Kira's the one who has to be, help, Asano's shadowing Kira, right? So Kira needs to give him advice, tell him what to do. Kira just ignores Asano. He didn't tell him what he had to do. He ignored him. So like, for example, Asano, being an assistant, has to do certain things. Kira wouldn't tell him what to do, and then the party would happen, and then Kira would say, Asano, why didn't you do this? This is missing. Why didn't you organize this? Why didn't you do this? And embarrass him in front of all the guests. So Asano was supposed to do this. Why didn't you do this? And Asano would get upset because he's like, well, you didn't tell me. I didn't know I had to do this. You're the one who has to give me the instructions. I didn't know, right? So it was just this, he would be mean to him. And this is like, you have Asano on the left and Kira on the right. This is, a woodblock print depiction, ukiyo-e depiction of their power struggle. So, some ways that Kira would piss off Asano. For example, at one event, Kira never told Asano that he should have changed the beddings for the guests. Okay, so the guests arrived, and Kira says, "Why didn't you change the beddings, Asano? I told you to do that." And Asano had to literally, in a few minutes, change hundreds of beddings. And, he's embarrassed because he looks bad in front of the guests, but Kira was the one who never told him to do it. So just bullying behavior. The final straw was there was one event. It was a fancy banquet, so you had to wear extremely formal attire. Okay, and Kira tells Asano to wear less formal attire. Okay, Kira actually says, "Oh, it's not that formal. Just wear whatever you want." So Asano comes to the party wearing very less formal attire, and you can imagine it's like walking into a black tie cocktail party with jeans and with shorts and a t-shirt. Okay, and everyone's looking at you like you're crazy. And Asano knew that Kira did this to humiliate him. So it's just a bit of bullying behavior. So at the party, Asano just cannot hold, he cannot control himself anymore. He pulls out his sword and cuts Kira's forehead. Okay, he doesn't kill him or even injure him really. The forehead was just scraped by the sword. It was a way for Asano. He couldn't control his temper, just to it's like slapping Kira, and no one's hurt, but it's just just to get his anger out. So even though Kira wasn't hurt, you as a daimyo serving the shogun are not allowed to pull out your sword in Edo Castle. That is a big no-no. It is dishonoring the shogun. And so when Shogun Tsunayoshi hears what happened, he's furious, and he forces Asano to commit seppuku, or ritual suicide. Okay, which of course Asano does. Outside of Edo Castle, he has to commit suicide, and the Asano daimyo family was also discontinued. Okay, and they lose their power, they lose their province. Back home, back in Hiroshima, news of Asano's suicide and also the fact that the clan was disbanded, news reaches Asano's castle. Okay, and Asano had 47 retainers who now are being told that you have no master to serve because your master is dead and your clan has been disbanded. So what happens to you? They become something called Ronin. Okay, and Ronin has the meaning of masterless samurai. In other words, if you serve a clan that has been discontinued and your leader is no more, you have nobody to serve. you're basically like a homeless samurai, essentially. So that's what a Ronin is. Okay, and the leader of, now they're called the 47 Ronin. Their leader is Mr. Oishi Kuranosuke. Okay. So, Oishi and his comrades, they know that they have to get revenge on Kira, okay? Because Kira is the one who went to the show. He was the one who was bullying Asano from the start, and he's really the one who got Asano so angry to the point of him pulling out his sword. So they know that if they just go, they know that Kira is expecting something to happen to him now. Okay, Kira's not stupid. So they know he has his guard up with a lot of protection, knowing that Asano's men will come after him. So they say, the Ronin say, let's wait 2 years. Let's wait for Kira's guard to be down, to get down, for him to forget about this. Then we're going to go get him and avenge our master's unfair death. Okay, and that's exactly what they do. They wait for 2 years until Kira's guard is down, and sure enough, then they go to Edo, and the 47 Ronin break into Kira's mansion and kill him, thus avenging the death of their master Asano. Okay, and this woodblock print is a depiction of that incident. And this is another depiction of the 47 Ronin storming into Kira's mansion and avenging their leader Asano's death. Okay. But even though this was a noble action because they took revenge for their master, it is illegal for a samurai who does not have a lord, someone telling them what to do. It is illegal for them to take revenge without receiving the direction of their superior. Their superior is no more, right? But still, it was illegal for them to go and do that without being told by their master. And so Oishi and his Ronin comrades were also forced to commit seppuku suicide, okay, ritual suicide. But they were, they write in the story that, this was something that they were okay with because they know that now they can face their master in the next world, knowing and tell him that we avenged your death and we got rid of the evil Kira who did this to you in the first place. But, thanks to Neo-Confucianism and their big, emphasis on loyalty and morality, the Tokugawa shogunate forgave the Asano clan because they thought about what happened and how Kira was the one who was being dishonest and evil. And so the shogun eventually forgives the Asano clan and restores their clan back to power in that province. And the 47 Ronin were also forgiven, and they were honored in Sengakuji Temple, which is sort of the place where they're enshrined. And conversely, the Kira clan of Lord Kira, the late Lord Kira, they had their stipend reduced. So sort of flipped. But it's too late because both Asano and his Ronin comrades were already dead. So that's the real 47 Ronin story of 1701. And this becomes very, very popular in the Edo period. This story is well known right from the start. In fact, a bunraku play, remember we learned about bunraku, the Japanese puppet theater? It's called Chushingra, a treasury of loyal retainers. This was released in 1748, and it becomes the most popular depiction of this story, the 47 Ronin. So right away in 1748, they come up with a play about the 47 Ronin. And the Tokugawa actually tried to ban this story because it didn't make them look very good, right? Since they were the ones who ordered Asano to commit suicide, but it became too popular for them to control. And eventually, Kabuki Plays about this incident were created, and now in the modern era, dramas, movies, and the most recent one is this latest movie with Keanu Reeves. They were created about the 47 Ronin's loyalty. So the samurai class really finds this renaissance after this story because their loyalty is praised. People start to look at the values of the samurai class with pride again because look, these 47 young people put their lives down for their master, right? But there was some criticism of the 47 Ronin by Neo-Confucian loyalists. They said that, for example, a samurai named Yamamoto Tsunetomo, he criticizes the 47 Ronin. He says, if you really, really were loyal to your master and you didn't have any regard for your own lives, you should have not thought about waiting 2 years. You should have taken revenge immediately. As soon as you heard that your master was dead, you should have gone right after Kira from the start instead of plotting. It depends. I personally disagree because I think that they would have all died in vain, and Kira would have probably stayed alive, right? But from a purist point of view, you shouldn't have plotted. You should have just gone and died right after your master did. But that's Mr. Yamamoto's opinion of this incident.